All right, welcome everybody. It's good to have you with us tonight. We are going to have a live chat here, video stream. Hopefully, it looks like we're live anyway. Still trying to. Oh no, I got to hit that. Now maybe we should be live. Okay, I had a picture, but I didn't hit the button to go live, so we should be going live. Every week seems like this changes, and I'm glad that you're with us. Anyway, I'll get it squared away one of these days, maybe. Maybe I'll get rich, and I don't care about being famous, and be able to hire somebody to do all this for me in some kind of booth way off on the other side of the complex. But for now, hey, we're going to be dug in here at the Preterist bunker in the middle of Indianapolis, Indiana, and we're going to be indoctrinating you tonight. That's what everybody says anyway. You know, they always kind of say, "Hey, well, yeah, blah blah blah. Yes, this is all you guys do. This is all you talk about. It's your pet, or no, what do they call it? It's your pet doctrine. There you go. Whatever, however you want to do it. Just whatever makes you sleep better at night, I suppose. I'm going to do my very best to present things in a very clear and concise manner. But here's the thing. Okay, for all you naysayers out there, and I know who you are. There are plenty of you. But anyway, for all the naysayers out there, and for all those who are perpetually against us, I have to say this. Sorry about you. You know, you expect us to answer a question in the same time it took you to ask it, and that's impossible. You can't even do that. I want to say hey to a couple guys that have joined us already. Looks like we have Brother Bill Evans with us. Good to see you, my friend, and my brother and fellow preacher preaching the truth. Bill Evans bringing it to Indianapolis. We're very thankful for him and his congregation. Also, Brother Roy Evans. Roy Runyon. I was thinking of Bob Evans when I looked at Bill Evans. And anyway, so there you go, Roy. You're making me think of breakfast down on the farm. Anyway, Brother Roy, it's good to have you with us. And Brother Tim Ogles, amazing to have you with us here tonight, too. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and get started. A couple weeks ago, on my last broadcast, I was talking about several different things, and on the YouTube side of things. So we broadcast simultaneously to Facebook and to YouTube. By the way, if you don't notice it there at the bottom of your screen, Restoration Movement 2.0 on YouTube. And we have, I have a tendency not to look at YouTube and the comments on YouTube as much as I do on Facebook. My streaming service does not combine the two. It'd be nice if there was something like that, and there might be, but so I apologize about that, and I'll do my best to try to look at those comments on YouTube as well. And I see here that Brother Brent Bishel is with us on YouTube. YouTube sometimes has a much better feed and better picture than Facebook does, at least for going live. So that is an option for you if you're having problems with Facebook. But so, hey, Brother Brent, good to see you with us tonight. And on top of that, they have changed the place that my comments are on Facebook, and I can't see them easily. I have to literally make an effort to find them, and lose my video and everything else when I do that. So that makes it a little harder. But so either way, I will try to try to follow those comments as much as possible. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be able to answer questions, which leads me to my next point. You see, I come to this on Tuesday nights sometimes more prepared than other times. Okay? Sometimes I just shoot from the hip, just right off, off the cuff kind of stuff. And sometimes I'll make a little preparation. But either way, I've got a goal in mind often. And that means that I'm going to spend time talking about that in my allotted hour to try to get that point across. So I might miss some questions. And I do try to go back and watch some of those, watch the video, or not watch the videos, look through the questions of the videos and try to answer some of those questions. And I know I'm not able to answer all of them, and I miss a lot, and sometimes there's just so many that I can't get to all of them. Either way, I am going to do my best to be a little better at that. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to talk about some questions that, oh yeah, hey, that reminds me, I just looked at this. I meant to say this. Last week, I wasn't here because my wife had surgery. That was exactly a week ago. She's doing better, but she's still in a lot of pain. And last couple of days have been pretty rough for her. The first 2 days were the easiest day. The day of the surgery, she just slept, and when she woke up, she felt pretty good. Then the next day, she felt pretty good, and then the pain block wore off, and then she's felt pretty miserable since then. So keep her all, if you would, y'all, keep her in your prayers. So at that previous live stream, there's a man who joins us from time to time, and I hope that he is able to make it here with us tonight. So I'm going to answer some of his questions. And he goes by the handle Bearded Man Drenaline. The Bearded Man Drenaline. That's got to be one of the most inventive handles, I guess you would call it, that I've seen. It's very interesting. And he often watches us on YouTube. So I'm going to try to answer a couple of his questions. So if he's not able to join us live tonight, then maybe we can get him where he can see the come back and watch him later, because his name is in the title. So otherwise, I don't know how to get in contact with him, because you can't tag people, as far as I know anyway, on YouTube. But so one of the questions that he had, and this is a legit question, okay? So I don't have a problem with this. There are some questions that are not very legit, like some guys that I've been dealing with on Facebook here today, and they just, yeah, that's just how I feel about them, Anyway, so the question is, because I had made comment about this and about Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, I do not diminish the fact that Jesus physically died, physically buried, and was physically resurrected. I do not deny that. Okay, so for all you naysayers, take the earplugs out and listen to me. Jesus Christ physically died, physically buried, and physically resurrected. But where you all mess up at is at this point. You stop right there. Right? You blame us for spiritualizing everything. Well, I blame you for physicalizing everything. And that's all you do. Everything is physical, 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 physical. It's like Olivia Newton-John all over again. Just want to get physical about everything religious. That tells you how old I am. But everything religious, and when it comes to the scriptures, all that you got, the best that you got is it was physical. He did die physically. I get that. He rose from the grave physically, but you leave the spiritual component out. Now, here's the reason you leave the spiritual component out. This is something that I told somebody on Facebook today when they were ridiculing me for, I don't remember what it was. A number of things. But I think the conversation was about heaven, and I asked them, I said, why do you guys not believe in heaven? Terry Wayne Benton and... I could probably pull it up. And anyway, there are a few others anyway, that answered that question and tried to, put me in my place. And one of the guys I just asked, because he had, no, this was on a different one, because this was on the subject of hell. And I essentially told them, there's no hell. There's no place of eternal conscious torment. And so anyway, we went back and forth a few times, and I said, okay, look, listen, it boils down to this. It all depends on how you start in the very beginning with the scriptures. If you believe that Adam did not die when he ate, that tells the whole story, because that's going to change the entire way you view everything eschatologically and soteriologically, really. all the way through the end of the scriptures, from Genesis to Revelation, the way you view that one significant, monumental thing, did Adam die the day he ate? The way you answer that question tells me just about everything. It tells the whole story. And here's the reason it tells the whole story. If you believe that Adam physically died the day, or was supposed to physically die the day that he ate, you can't justify that. So you have to, because he didn't. Adam did not die physically the day that he ate. So that can't be physical death. But if you're going to physicalize everything, then you have to say, well, he did die. He began the dying process. And there is your problem. Now, if you view this from a spiritual aspect, and Adam died the day that he ate, exactly the way God said. Now, think about this. In the garden, you go back and read this, right? Brush up on your Genesis 2 and 3. In the garden, there were two teachings there in the garden. One from the shiny one, the serpent. And he said, nope, you will not die the day you eat. And then God said, you will die the day you eat. There are people teaching one or the other of those doctrines today. Now, my question is, which one are you teaching? Are you teaching that, no, he didn't die the day that he ate? Then, if that's the case, then you're siding with the serpent, the so-called serpent. If you believe that he died the day that he ate, then you're siding with God. That's just the simplest way to put it. Okay? So, if you're going to rationalize everything, starting at day one, well, whatever day it was, with Adam, then you must do that. You must follow suit and physicalize everything from Genesis through Revelation. You have to do that. Here's the fact. God said to Adam, the day you eat thereof, you will surely die. And I believe that he died. And I believe he lost his soul, so to speak. That he was separated from God. That is death. And by the way, it's the same death that Paul spoke of in Romans chapter 7. He said, I once was alive, but then I died. Was that physical death? Are you going to physicalize that? Or are you going to spiritualize it like it should be in its proper context? So when you do that, then you wind up all sorts of places all over the spectrum of eschatology, and it just really messes you up. So you've got to learn to keep it in its proper context and just simply take God at his word for what he said and leave it at that. And that's what he did. Adam died the day that he ate. That's what I believe, because that's what God said. I don't believe that the serpent, the shining one or shiny one, was anywhere near telling the truth. He was telling a half-truth. We all get that. Well, we should anyway. So when you start from that aspect and you go all the way to the resurrection of Jesus, all you can do is physicalize it. And the reason you do that is because you are not taught the Old Testament. And I'm right in that exact same spot with y'all too, okay? You weren't taught about the Scriptures. You weren't taught the Scriptures, okay? These are the Scriptures that Paul used. We see Paul using these Scriptures in Acts chapter, picking Acts. But every time he spoke to somebody, he was using the Scriptures. But in Acts chapter 17, the Scriptures got him in hot water. We're talking about the Old Testament. By the way, this is Bearded Man Drenaline's second question about these Scriptures from Revelation 19 and 10. And so we'll address that too. So he's got two questions I'm trying to address here today. The first one was, what about Lazarus and all the others that were raised before Jesus? And the second one is, what does Revelation 19:10 mean? So these kind of go together. Now, so getting back to this, I got to go over here. So you've got Jesus, and he's dying on the cross, and that's all you can see. Is you can see a physical thing, physical blood. Let me ask you this question. If you're so physicalizing everything, I'm loving this word, right? Physicalize. You can say it fast. So if you're going to physicalize everything, then guess what? You're going to have to physicalize All you futurists out there accuse us of spiritualizing. Well, I'm accusing you of spiritualizing or physicalizing because you don't spiritualize. You're going to have to physicalize everything about his death and his burial and his resurrection. Let's ask one simple question. Would it have been possible for Jesus to resurrect out of the tomb, his physical body coming out of the tomb, if he had not first resurrected out of Sheol? There's only one answer to that. If Jesus had not been able to leave Sheol, that grip of Sheol, we're going to show you these passages here in just a moment, then he would still be stuck there and his body would still be rotting in that tomb. He would not have been Messiah. Somebody trying to call me? I don't know. I know you guys think I'm crazy. I can't figure out how to turn off the vibrate. I can turn off the sound, but not the vibrate. So either way, we'll put that over there. Well, no, I better keep it there just in case. Trent was supposed to come tonight, but I knew he was running close and it was iffy. So hopefully maybe he'll be able to be with us tomorrow. So you have physicalized the resurrection of Jesus because you started way back in Genesis with your very first impressions of God as being God doesn't really mean what he says. Well, he said Adam would die the day that he ate thereof, but he didn't. Yes, he did. If God didn't mean that, he wouldn't have said it. So let me ask you this question. Just bear with me here. Did Adam die the day that he ate? Remember? You shall surely die, he said. Yahweh said to Adam. And you say, well, no, he didn't. It's the same language when God said, the day you eat. So did Adam eat in that day? If Adam ate in that day, Adam died in that day. Otherwise, Adam didn't really eat in that day if he didn't really die in that day. Now, which one do you want to believe? I'm going to show you this idea of resurrection. Because the question was, okay, so and I don't have his exact question. Apparently they fall off of YouTube, I think, because I couldn't find it. But I remember the question. I jotted it down real quick about Lazarus and the others being raised. So the question was, well, what about all the resurrections before Lazarus? And some have said, well, if there's before Jesus, if there's a resurrection that took place before Jesus, then Jesus wasn't the first fruits, coming from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, that he wasn't the first one to be raised. Okay, so let's consider this. So look here with me at 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Now this just illustrates that we have ignored 2/3 of the scriptures, if not more. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And we've done that because of our indoctrination. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I'm going to. So I'm just going to put this out there. There's so much Catholicism in our background. Now, you study about Catholicism, you're going to see that they take this doctrine and this belief and that belief. And it doesn't matter if it's pagan or Christian or Hindu or whatever it is. And especially during the time when they were very militarized and they would go somewhere and they would conquer a city or a people and they would say, hey, you're going to start worshiping God now, but you can keep your old beliefs. We'll just work them in there somehow. So they've got a lot of things mixed in there, and people have just bought into that today, and they call it New Testament Christianity. Nothing of the sort. Okay? Paul exhorted Timothy, he said, listen, do not be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine. Paul told Timothy, listen, you need to be diligent about your study. Why? So that you can prove what's right. Stand firm and just all these other things, right? So that's one of the reasons when you read 1 Corinthians chapter 15, starting in verse 20, you don't understand what it means to be the first one resurrected. So that's what we're going to talk about. But let me read this. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And then I'm going to show you a couple charts here, and we'll go through some of these things. 1 Corinthians 15:20. But now Christ has been raised from the dead, the first fruits of those who are asleep. So the modern traditional Church of Christ preachers are saying Jesus was the first one raised from the dead. Well, that's not true. He was the seventh one. Now, if that's not enough to give you, how would you say this, make you think, then I don't know what is. How do I do this here? I need to figure something out, okay, I can do it this way. Oh, hey, yeah, I gotta, is that right? There we go. So I'm going to show you this slide here, okay? So I think this is probably about as good as this is going to get, as far as I can. Oh, I can't remember how to do all this, but hopefully you can read this. Okay, so Jesus was not the first to be resurrected. And if you look at that, here you've got, and we're going to go through these, we're going to show you the significance of these. You've got the widow of Zarephath's son. Okay, this is in, then you've got the Shunammite woman's son, the man raised out of Elisha's grave, the widow of Nain's son, Jairus' daughter, and then you've got Lazarus. 6 biblical examples of resurrection before Jesus. So when we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and we read that Jesus was the first fruits, the modern day traditional Church of Christ preachers, they say, just like George Parsley did in my debate with him. George Parsley says, well, it's just like an apple tree. There's the first apple that comes off of the tree, and then all the rest are just like him. That is not what the first fruits is. Okay, the first fruits is part of the 7 feasts of Yahweh. Now, I need a bookmark. So my ribbon actually fell out of my Bible. We knew it was going to happen. So anyway, I had to find a bookmark there. So I want you to come over here with me to Leviticus. Okay? So in Leviticus, I'm going to show you why. This is Leviticus 23. I'm going to show you why Jesus was the first one to be resurrected. But he wasn't the first one to be resurrected. Well, how do you figure all that then? Because the first one to be resurrected was the first fruits. None of the other 6 that we just mentioned were first fruits. And I'm going to show you why. So just hang in there with me. But notice this, Leviticus 23, verse 9. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land which I'm going to give you, and to reap its harvest, then you shall bring in the sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest to the priest. And you can go to Joshua 5 and so on, and you can see how this works. So you can do a little study on this. But it wasn't until they crossed over Jordan until they reaped the benefits of the first fruit. Now, the first fruit was, plug that in. If you physicalize everything, then you're going to say, well, we haven't crossed over Jordan yet. Yes, we have. If we're not in the promised land, we haven't crossed over Jordan. Crossing over Jordan means you are in the New Jerusalem. I mean, if you can't see that, then that makes me sad because you're missing out on a lot of truth. But anyway, back to Leviticus 23. He shall wave the sheaf before the Lord for you as accepted on the day after the Sabbath, and the priest shall wave it. Now on the day when you wave the sheaf, you shall offer a male lamb, 1 year old without defect, for a burnt offering to the Lord. Okay? So here's what you got. You got to offer this lamb at the time of the first fruits. The first fruits is when you take that first grain out of the ground. You don't mill it. You don't crush it. You don't remove the chaff. Nothing. Okay? It's the very first purest produce of the ground. And that is the first fruits. Now, let me ask you a question. Just in case some of you are out there going, no, this doesn't make any sense. Was Jesus sinless? Just answer that question. Was he the purest? Just answer that question. Yes. Okay? In this respect, This is what makes Jesus the first fruits of the ground, first fruits offering of the resurrection. That is the picture of, get this, the 7 feasts. You got it? Now, the 7 feasts picture the first coming of the Lord and the second coming of the Lord. The first 4 feasts picture the incarnation of Jesus, right? His coming here, and then you've got Passover, you've got unleavened bread, you got first fruits, then you got Pentecost. Okay, so those first 4 feasts picture the messianic work of Jesus, especially those last 3 years or so, 3.5 years, whatever. And then there's a period of time, and then the last 3 feasts picture his second coming. During the first 4 feasts, Jesus is the Lamb. He's the one being offered for the covering of sin. You will not find any place in the Scriptures anywhere whatsoever that illustrates that Jesus ever went into the most holy place while alive here. You cannot physicalize that. He didn't do it. So what was the blood that he took into heaven? Was it a physical blood? I'm still asking this question. You can ask a question in 10 seconds, but it doesn't get answered in 10 seconds. You're going to have to do some Bible study. Have to be diligent about it. Did Jesus take his physical blood into heaven? And I'll tell you guys, we have sat across the table with people, preachers in the Church of Christ, some Pentecostal preachers when backed against the wall. Guess what they came out swinging with? Well, I guess he must have. He must have taken his physical blood into heaven because he's going to physically come back. You don't find that in the Scriptures. You physicalize it in the Scriptures, but you don't find it in the Scriptures. Now, get this. What was the blood that Jesus took into heaven? It was not the blood of the Lamb. The blood of the Lamb, according to Leviticus 17, was for the covering of sin. It was a temporary covering until that summer period where there were no feasts would elapse, and then the last 3 feasts would come, and then the very first feast at the Feast of Trumpets, they all 3 happen together. They're pretty much simultaneous. You got the Feast of Trumpets, the Feast of Atonement, and the Feast of Booths or Tents. Okay? So, what was the blood that was taken into the most holy place at the last 3 feasts? It was the blood of the bulls and the goats that went into heaven, that was sprinkled in the most holy place. That's what Jesus took into heaven with him. Okay, so this is so significant. When he offered himself on the cross, it was for a temporary covering of sins until he could come back for salvation, which is what he said in Luke chapter 21. When you see these things taking place, lift up your head. Your redemption draws nigh. Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 28. He appears a second time for what? Salvation. Isaiah chapter 25, and I think it's about, 7 or 14 or something like that. This is our God for whom we have waited, that he might save us. Salvation comes at the return of the Lord. That's why this is so important. It just drives me nuts when people say, well, why is it so important for you to teach eschatology? You just beat it to death all the time, and that's all you ever talk about. Because it's the truth. Because it illustrates salvation, and it illustrates what we have now. Not the dismal, dingy, dark, and depressing. Wow, that was 4 in a row. Dismal, dingy, dark, and depressing. Doctrine of futurism. You're waiting for a time when you shed no tears. You don't even know what that means. Well, we're not going to cry in heaven because God's going to make us forget everything and we won't remember anything, so that's the reason we're not going to cry. You got to be kidding me. I heard that so often, and I just thought, that never makes sense. God's going to make us live 70 or 80 years here and go through all these things and have all of these experiences and never be able to remember a thing about it so that we can appreciate our salvation eternally? Yeah, it never squared very well with me. Let me check a few things here. What do we got? Julie Hand and Rick Brown. Hey, great to see you guys with us here tonight. What else? Dusty Rose with us. Bobby Allison, the ever impressive Bobby Allison, taking it to the streets. My brother, you just you keep on preaching it, because preaching the truth is what it's about. You know, anybody can preach this feel-good doctrine. And believe you me, guys, the Church of Christ is just as guilty today as all of those other denominations when they stand up in the pulpit and they preach a rah-rah sermon. And they want to give you 3 points in a poem. They're just as guilty of trying to entertain you, to keep you there and to keep you giving your money, than to simply telling you the truth. Listen to this. You teach someone the truth only, and you will produce a Christian only. Got it? So, brother, you just keep on doing it. I'm so proud to know you. That's Minnie Pearl, for those of you who don't know any better. Okay, so let me get back up here to my video and check these things out. So, there's where we're at. Jesus was the first fruits. I want to show you, I'm going to go back over here to my chart, and I want to show you, let me open this up here and do a little transition on the button. The widow of Zarephath's son, okay? So, I'm going to go back over here. How do I do this? Let's do this, and let's read about... Right here it is. Okay, so this is 1 Kings chapter 17, starts in verse 17. Here's how it reads. Now it happened after these things that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became sick, and his condition became very grave, until at the end he was no longer breathing. So he stopped breathing. He died. I've heard some people say, "Oh, he didn't die." Well, let's keep reading. So she said to Elijah, Why is my business any of yours, you man of God? Yet you have come to me to bring my wrongdoing to remembrance and to put my son to death. But he said to her, Give me your son. Then he took him from her arms and carried him up to the stairs, to the upstairs room. I'll get it straight. Where he was living, and laid him on his own bed. And he called to the Lord and said, Lord, my God, you have also brought catastrophe upon the widow with whom I am staying by causing her son to die. Is there any question that he died? No. Then he stretched himself out over the body of the boy, 3 times, and called to the Lord and said, Lord my God, please let this boy's life return to him. Still any question that he was dead? And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah, and the life of the boy returned to him, and he revived. And Elijah took the boy and brought him down from the upstairs room into the house and gave him to his mother. And Elijah said, See, your son is alive. Then the woman said to Elijah, Now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord is in your mouth is truth. So, is there any question that this guy died, this kid, this child, this widow's son, that he died and Elijah brought him back to life? He was dead just for a very short period of time. That's the point. And a notable miracle took place, and Yahweh granted his life to come back to him. The next one is the Shunammite's woman's son. Okay, so this is found in 2 Kings, which I had time to actually pull this one up, so we'll check this one out. So you got the Shunammite woman's son in 2 Kings chapter 4. And it says, when the child was grown, the day came that he went out to his father, to the reapers, and he said to his father, my head. He's saying, Daddy, my head hurts. Father, my head hurts, however you put it. And his father said to him, carry him to his mother. When he had carried him in and brought him to his mother, he sat on her lap until noon, and then he died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, and shut the door behind him and left. And then she called to her husband and said, please send me one of the servants and one of the donkeys, so that I may run to the man of God and return. But he said, why are you going to him today? It's neither new moon or Sabbath. So she just said, it will be fine. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her servant, drive the donkey and go on. Do not slow down the pace for me unless I tell you. She went on and came to the man of God on Mount Carmel. When the man of God saw her at a distance, he said to Gehazi, his servant, behold, that person there is the Shunammite. Please run now to meet her and say to her, is it going well for you? And is it going well for your husband? And is it going well for the child? And she answered, it is going well. But she came to the man of God at the hill and took hold of his feet. And Gehazi came up to push her away. But the man of God said, leave her alone, for her soul is troubled within her. That's why he's a man of God, a prophet. He could tell that. Anyway, and the Lord has concealed it from me and has not informed me. And then she said, did I ask for my son, for a son from my Lord? Did I not say, do not give me false hope? Then he said to Gehazi, get ready and take up my staff in your hand and go. If you meet anyone, do not greet him. If anyone greets you, do not reply to him. And lay my staff at the boy's face. And the mother of the boy said, as surely as the Lord lives, and you yourself live, I will not leave you. So he got up and followed her. And then Gehazi went on ahead of them and laid the staff at the boy's face. But there was no sound or response. So he returned to meet him and informed him, saying, the boy has not awakened. When Elisha entered the house, behold, the boy was dead, laid on his bed. So he entered and shut the door behind them both, and he prayed to the Lord. Then he got up on the bed and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, his eyes on his eyes, his hands on his hands, and he bent down on him, and the flesh of the child became warm. Then he returned and walked in the house back and forth once, and he went up and bent down on him, and the boy sneezed 7 times. Then the boy opened his eyes, and he called Gehazi, and he said, call this Shunammite. So he called her. When she came to him, he said, pick up your son. And then she came in and fell at his feet and bowed down to the ground. She picked up her son and left. Now, let me ask you a question here. Did this young man die? Yes, he did. Was he brought back to life? Yes, he was. It took a couple attempts, but it did happen. How long was he dead? Not very long. Let's look at the next one here. Okay. Transition this one. Okay, number 3. So you got the man raised out of Elisha's grave. I'll have to get this one pulled up here. So let me do that. It'd be a lot easier just to read it, truthfully, but either way, we can do this. Okay. Actually, I think I did that wrong. Okay, I'll get it straight here. Okay, here we go. Oh, yeah, you need to see it. Sorry. This is 2 Kings 13, verse 20. Elisha died, and they buried him. Now the marauding bands of the Moabites would invade the land in the spring of the year. And as they were burying a man, behold, they saw a marauding band, and they threw the man into the grave of Elisha. And when the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood up on his feet. Okay, so this guy's dead. They throw him in Elisha's grave. It touches Elisha, and then he's revived, and he stood up on his feet. Okay, so there you go. They were burying this guy. They thought he was dead. So was he dead? And how long was he dead? You know, he was dead just a short period of time. Let's come back over to here. The widow of Nain's son. There in Luke 7. I guess just kind of for the sake of time here, because I got a lot more ground I want to cover. Dead for a short period of time. Jairus' daughter, Luke chapter 8, verses 52 to 56, dead for a short period of time. Lazarus of Bethany was dead longer than Jesus. And he was raised by Jesus. He was dead longer than Jesus by about 24 hours, roughly. Maybe close to the same time, you know, but either way, within a day or so, depending on how the time is actually counted. But my point in all of this is, you have, and I point this here out, at the bottom of this slide, you have 6 physical bodily resurrections recorded before Jesus. They were all consigned to their physical bodies once again, only to physically die once more. So how can Jesus be the first fruits? This is real simple. Matter of fact, what slide is this? Oh, come on. I've got like 300 slides in here, so it takes me a minute to find them. I think this one's it. Jesus died never to die again. So we're going to look at a few of these passages here before we move on, a few of the things here in this passage rather, and some of these passages. But how was Jesus the first fruits and not these guys? Well, because they all had to come back to their body and die again. And dying again means that they were consigned to Sheol. When you went to Sheol, under that old covenant system, before Jesus opened heaven and threw Sheol into the lake of fire, you could not escape. You were stuck there. That, by the way, is one of the reasons the Sadducees believed that there would not be a resurrection. That once you went to Hades, rather Sheol, Hades is Greek term, Sheol is Hebrew term. They mean exactly the same thing, as used in the scriptures anyway. So, once you went there, that was it. So they believed there would be no resurrection. You're stuck there. That's as good as it's going to get. But that's not what the scriptures teach. The scriptures teach that Hades, Sheol, the covering would be ripped off, and all of the nations would be judged. This is Isaiah 24 through 27. Specifically in chapter 25. Well, I think it's also in 24. But anyway, I'll get a little bogged down on that. But I want to show you this. See, I just need 2 hours, 2 or 3 hours for all this. Chapter 24. Notice what Isaiah 24 says. Like I said, I need a lot more time. Verse 21, so it will happen in that day that the Lord will punish the host of heaven on high and the kings of the earth on the earth. They will be gathered together like prisoners in the dungeon. Matter of fact, in 1 Peter chapter 3, don't we see Jesus going to talk to the prisoners? Anyway. So they're prisoners in the dungeon and will be confined in prison, and after many days they will be visited, is what it should say. Mine says punished. It's talking about Sheol or Hades. And then there comes this point when the covering is removed. Look at verse 8 in the next chapter. This is at the time, by the way, in verse 6, that the Lord of hosts will prepare a lavish banquet for all peoples on this mountain. A banquet of aged wine, choice pieces with marrow, refined aged wine. And on this mountain he will swallow up the covering which is over all peoples. That's Sheol. Even the veil which is stretched out over all nations. What is that? This is preventing a reunion between Yahweh and his creation, because in the garden they were separated. Remember what I said earlier? If you believe incorrectly about death and Adam's death in Genesis, in the Genesis account, and you physicalize it, then you will never ever get any of these spiritual meanings. Anyway, so this is at the time, by the way, when the Lord will wipe away all the tears from all the faces. Why? Because the separation from him is taken away. When you're in Christ Jesus today, listen to this. When you're baptized into Christ. Now, Michael Miano made a good point in his debate with Steve Baisden over baptism. And here it is. You must be immersed in Jesus. Now, if you want to physicalize that, you've made a grave error. But if you want to just spiritualize it, you've made a grave error. Both things are required. If you can't see the spiritual aspect of it, the physical aspect means nothing. Mark 16 and verse 16 says that. He who believes and is baptized shall be saved. He who does not believe, doesn't matter how many times you get baptized, you will not be saved. Get it? Okay. So Michael would have Mark 16:16 saying you have to believe and believe. Seemingly. Anyway, I need a drink. Now, so I probably left a little bit out there, but that's okay. Because we need to look at Romans chapter 6. So we're going to go here to Romans chapter 6. And now that we're armed with this information, that once you went to Sheol, before Christ did his messianic work, and our brethren do not believe Jesus was victorious. They do not believe Jesus was victorious. Matter of fact, let me pull this up here because I think this might help us actually quite a bit. So this will be Romans 6. So we're going to go to Romans 6, and I'll put this up here on the screen so maybe you can look at it and we can go through this here. But these are the passages that we often go to, and if you're in the Church of Christ, you got verses 3 and 4 pretty much memorized, I'm guessing. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. So, you know, we quote these often, but we're kind of proof texting when we do that because there's so much that is left out in the Church of Christ's understanding about water baptism and that spiritual baptism that takes place simultaneously, that just quoting verses 3 and 4 truly is not enough. It's really not enough. But here's what it says. Do you not know that all of us who have been baptized into Christ Jesus have been baptized into his death? Okay, what death? Let's keep reading. Therefore we have been buried with him through baptism into death, so that just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, so we may too walk in the newness of life. Now get this. Where was Jesus buried? And if you're going to physicalize it, and you're going to say, he was buried in a tomb, then what about those other 6 people? Where were they buried? Because they were all in that likeness of dying and coming back to life. Where are they buried? The only one that I could read of that was buried, one was kind of buried. He was thrown in the tomb. They were trying to bury him, but it didn't work very well. But Lazarus was buried. So there's no real consistency there about their burials, but there's consistency with the burial of Jesus. Jesus died. This is Isaiah 54, 53. Okay, this is all over. Okay, Jesus paid a spiritual price as well as a physical price. The physical price was only a representation of what was going on spiritually. If the physical price was all that needed to be paid, why not a repentant man other than Jesus, who was clean enough to do it? Well, you can say, well, only Jesus was that. Yes, I agree with that. And this is the reason why. Because Jesus had no sin when he entered the Hadean realm, Sheol. It could not hold him. That is the context of Romans chapter 6. That's the death and the burial and the resurrection that's being talked about. Paul is not physicalizing it. He's using the physical as an illustration. And he says, physically, you need to be baptized in order to be spiritually baptized. And there's so much more of that. Just go and listen. Steve just did a fantastic job refuting Michael. That Calvinism stuff, guys, is a dangerous doctrine. And he says it's not Calvinism, but it is. I mean, he may leave a few points out and that kind of thing and tweak it here and there, but it's Calvinism. Anyway, notice what he says here. He says, knowing this, that our old self was crucified with him in order that our body of sin might be done away, so that we would no longer be slaves to sin. Now, there's a fantastic argument, one which we're not going to go into here tonight, that this is referencing and alluding to this old covenant body. This is the next chapter. Romans 7, explains this concept. So what Paul does in Romans chapter 7, he goes back to Adam. And he says, if you don't understand Adam and how Adam died, you'll never understand how I died. And he said, I died, but then I lived again. That's the context of Romans chapter 6. But check this out. Okay? Now, if we have... Why is that not highlighting? Let's try this again. There we go. Well, I'll make it work. Now, if we have died with Christ, here's his argument. We believe that we shall also live with him. Okay, for all you Church of Christers who believe you do not live with Jesus until he comes back, how do you explain this verse? Anyone who believes that you go to Sheol when you die or to Hades when you die does not believe that you have died with Christ. Listen to this. Now, if we have died with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him. This we is not a royal we. This we is not us. This we was them. Get the picture? It's not us. Who is expecting to live with Christ? Let me keep on reading. If we have died with Christ, we believe this is death, burial, and resurrection. This is the baptism he had just discussed. Okay, now he's explaining it. If we've died with Christ, we believe that we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, having been raised from the dead, is never to die again. Death no longer, is master over him. Let's look at this. Notice what this idea is, raised from the dead, here in Romans chapter 6 and verse 9. It's ek nekron, the dead. It is plural. Can I highlight this here? Yeah, well, there you go. You see that? I can't do it. I'm going to wind up messing up my slide. I don't want to do that. Oh, great. Maybe it's going to close. Okay, I don't want to mess this up. Anyway, but you can see there that it's plural. So Jesus, remember what that said? Let me go back over here. If we have died with Christ, we believe we shall also live with him, knowing that Christ, having been raised from the dead ones, not from his death, singularly, from the pool of dead ones, is never to die again. Now, all of those guys, those previous 6 that we talked about, all of them would die again, physically, and they would go to Sheol and experience that death or that separation from Yahweh. Paul explains it in the context of Romans chapter 6 and in verse 9 that death is no longer master over him. Why? Because he wasn't subjected to Sheol and its grip. Which you're going to see this in just a second. He was not subject to that grip of death. He broke the bonds of death. How many times do you have to sing that on Sunday morning in the first or the second song, or the one just before the Lord's Supper, when you're singing only the first and the second verses? How many times do you have to sing that to get the picture? He broke the bonds or the death grip that Hades had over him, that Sheol had over him. Now notice in verse 10. In verse 10 he says, For the death that he died once to sin, once for all time. Go ahead and physicalize that. Let me read it again. The death that he died once to sin for all time. But the life that he lives to God. If he died a physical death, and that was the only price that he paid, and he didn't have to pay any price that the scriptures told us he would pay. They had to pay in his soul. Isaiah, was that chapter 53? He had to pay with his soul. That's how he lives to God. Because why? Let me go back to my chart. Where's my cursor? Right there. Okay? Notice it. He raised from the pool of the dead ones, the eknekron, out of the dead ones, See it right here? Raised out of the dead ones. It's plural. It's the same plurality that is in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It's the same plurality. By the way, when I'm in these screens, there's no hope for me to even know if I'm still on. So hopefully I am. Anyway, so he was raised out of the Hadean realm. That's the dead that he was raised from. Coming out of the tomb was just a sign that he had spiritually resurrected. Then he came back to his body and went walking around. Now, let me give you an illustration of this. Remember when the witch of Endor raised Samuel? He comes up from Hades and he says, "Why did you bring me back here?" He didn't come back to a physical body. Why? Because his body had turned to dust. He was long gone. It was not a physical resurrection. But it certainly wasn't a resurrection of the first fruits kind, because he didn't come back to his physical body. He wasn't able to stay. He wasn't able to ascend into heaven. He was not the first fruits. He had to go back to Sheol. "Why'd you bring me up from here?" he says. "Let me go back." So let's ask this question here. Where were the dead ones? We already answered this. They were in Hades. Okay, they were in Hades. These dead ones in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, in Romans chapter 6 and verse 9, where Jesus was, guess what? That's Hades. And there's a few passages, one that you're familiar with, probably Luke chapter 16, the story of the rich man and Lazarus. Psalm 89 is a good one, but I want to show you 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 18. I'm just going to read this, because this goes along so well with what we've already talked about. So 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 18, here's what it says. "For Christ also died for sins once for all, the just for the unjust, so that he might bring us to God, having been put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit." Now listen to this. He was put to death in the flesh, but what happened when his flesh died? Who? His flesh or him? What is him? Who is the he? It's Jesus in the Spirit, was made alive in the Spirit, in which he also went and made proclamation to the spirits now in prison. Where did we read that? Isaiah chapter 24. So here's what Jesus did when he died, as Peter preached on the day of Pentecost. His soul was not left in Hades. He defeated that grave. That is the grave. It's not the physical grave that he defeated. 6 other people did that before Jesus. Several others did it after Jesus, before his return. None have done it since. And probably, truthfully, a long time before his return in 70. So there you go. They were in Hades. Those dead ones were in Hades. Now, here's what this looks like in the interlinear. Is never to die again. No more dies. Okay? He doesn't die anymore. Why doesn't he die anymore? Now think about this. All those 6 people that we talked about, and even if you want to put Samuel in there with that, and the Witch of Endor, they had to die again. They had to go back to Hades. That's death. Now, if you don't think that death and Hades are synonymous, that they run along the same vein, then you're just going to have to tell me what this means, okay? This is Hosea chapter 13, verse 14. I want you to look at this, okay? Shall I, it should be I shall, ransom them from the power of Sheol? Shall I redeem them from death? O death, where are your thorns? O Sheol, where is your sting? That's 1 Corinthians chapter 15, isn't it? Of course we know it is. It's unquestionable. Where's your sting, O grave? What's he talking about? Let me show you this. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And he quotes this. And this is after he says, verse 54, when the perishable will have put on imperishable, and this mortal will have put on immortality. By the way, you cannot find one shred of Scripture in 1 Corinthians 15 that says you are going to raise physically at the end of time. It's not there. Here's what is there. The perishable puts on imperishable. The mortal puts on immortality. Matter of fact, while we're here, might as well look at it. Check this out. Verse 42, so also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown a perishable body, is raised imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. You're not going to have a physical body raised at the end of time. Any raising that happens is not physicalized. It's spiritualized, whether you like it or not. Anyway, back to verse 54. But when this perishable will have put on imperishable, and this mortal will have put on immortality. So he's just repeating. He says, when that takes place, then will come about the saying, death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? When does that take place? Hosea chapter 13. When the iniquity of Ephraim is bound up. Chapter 13 verse 12. When the pains of childbirth come upon him. That's the destruction of Jerusalem. Matthew 24 and verse 8. He is not a wise son, for it is not the time that he should delay at the opening of the womb. This is time that the birth is taking place. Just so much imagery there about this being in the first century. And that is when death and Sheol were destroyed. All right, let's keep looking. So I want to show you here, death is no longer master over him. Okay, so death is no longer master over Jesus. Hades does not hold him any longer. This idea of Thanatos. Now, this is multifaceted, but one of the facets of this that really intrigues me is this idea that Thanatos was kind of a Greek embodiment of him who is in league with the Greek god Hades to keep you there. No matter how much you tried to get out of there, tried to swim back up the river Styx, you couldn't do it because death and Hades, Thanatos and Hades, kept you there. They wouldn't let you leave. And it just makes me wonder if Paul was drawing on that Hellenization of these Jews. And of course, the Gentiles would have got that pretty easily. By painting the picture that Jesus defeated Thanatos. And he no longer had command of his soul in the Hadean realm. Let me go back here. So Jesus resurrected victorious over the death of Adam. This goes back to what I said at the beginning. Spiritually, unlike any other before him. That makes him the first fruits from the grave. Okay, so those 6 that rose before Jesus. See, it took him every bit of 6 seconds to type in his question, and he's actually pretty good. He doesn't give me a lot of flack, which is good. I'm thankful for that. I mean, if I need flack, I should get it, but he doesn't do it, and I'm thankful for that. So by the way, I see that you've joined us, Bearded Man Drenaline. Well, I just love that name. So we've been talking about you here tonight. So if you missed much, you have to go back and watch because it's kind of lengthy. I'm still answering the first question. I do want to take a moment and address RX7. Fire away. Type your question in there, and I'll see if I can get to it before we close here because I'm running over time again. Imagine that. Oh well. So let's go back here to this concept. So the idea about Lazarus and all the others that were raised before Jesus, Jesus was the first fruits because of Leviticus chapter 23 and the 7 feasts. Now remember, we went over that. He was the first, best, clean, most purest, undefiled that came up. In this case, the type or the shadow, however you want to look at it, is that grain coming out of the ground. The first fruits. Those who came after him, and I didn't go over this, the second first fruits. Okay, this is important. The second first fruit had leaven added in. The flour had been, or the grain had been processed, had been turned into flour. They added leaven and baked bread. So it's not those who come after Jesus are not like the guy debated, George Parsley, who said, well, Jesus was like just the first fruit, the first apple off of the apple tree, and then all the other apples that come off the apple tree are just like him. They just come later. No. They could never have escaped. Only Jesus could be the first fruits. Then there was a second first fruits offering. Go back and read Leviticus 23 and do your Google search about second first fruits and what that is. And it equates to the resurrection of everybody else. That's exactly what Jesus was talking about in 1 Corinthians 15. Let me make this point. I'm summarizing what I already went over. In 1 Corinthians 15, it's the eknekron. Jesus was resurrected out of the pool of the dead ones, or Sheol. He was the first one. Once he did that, Revelation, what is that? 1. Revelation 1, the end of the chapter. He had the keys to death and Hades, didn't he? He gave those keys to Peter in Matthew 16, starting in verse 18. I will build my church, he said. He gave Peter the keys to the kingdom. What's kingdom? It's heaven. That's when heaven was opened. The preaching of the gospel. The gospel was telling about Jesus and his death, burial, and resurrection. And that's what they were explaining their whole lifetime until it actually occurred in the 70 AD as epitomized by the destruction of Jerusalem. So Jesus was the first fruits, and he could only have been the first fruits. Once he was the first fruits, the clock started ticking for everybody else to empty Hades and complete that resurrection. And that happened in the first century. And I know there's more to that I haven't even begun to talk about. But I want to make mention of this. Remember, Paul said that we will all be changed in the moment, in the twinkling of an eye. Okay? Listen to this. 1 Corinthians 15, behold, or now I say this, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God. So Jesus did not take his physical blood into heaven, by the way. Nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. He just said everybody's going to be changed. The dead and those who are not dead. It's the same as 1 Thessalonians 4. Your status changes. You go from being separated. This is huge. This is what they were waiting for from the promise of Abraham. Your status changes from separated from God to now being in him. And then, we talked about Romans 6. We talked about Romans 7. But in Romans chapter 8 and verse 1, it's not really the conclusion, but it's kind of like a mid-thought summarization. He says, there is now, therefore, no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. Under the old law, you stood condemned. In Christ Jesus, you suffer no condemnation. Man, that is fantastic news. That's what they were waiting for. Man, I wish I could watch all these comments here. I hate that they moved this down here so I can't see it. I'll just have to go back over them later because I'm 10 minutes over now. And I still want to answer this last question. I don't think I have to take an hour and 10 minutes to answer this because it kind of goes along with what we've already been talking about. And this is Revelation chapter 19 and verse 10. Unless I'm going to talk about all the other stuff in chapter 19, verse 10. But here's what verse 10 says. Then I fell at his feet to worship him, but he said to me, do not do that. For I am a fellow servant of yours and your brethren who hold the testimony of Jesus. What's the testimony of Jesus? So he says, I'm a fellow servant. So you've got John, you've got the angel, they're fellow servants, and they hold to the testimony of Jesus. Worship God, for the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. This is why this is so important. This is why eschatology is so important. Because it explains. Look at what we were able to do with baptism from Romans 6 and some of the other places that we briefly talked about here tonight, and how powerful that is when injected with the proper eschatology and what that actually means and how powerful that is. It's not just a box you check off and yeah, I was baptized Mother's Day 1980. I don't know what day that was. It was in May, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I was baptized. So now I got to be good. You got that all wrong. You got it all wrong. Anyway, the testimony of Jesus is prophecy. Now remember what we said about Acts chapter 17. So Paul went to the Thessalonians and he shared the same prophecies and the same fulfillment of prophecy and the same impending prophecies to be fulfilled that they would witness that he did with the Bereans and the Ephesians and whoever else he talked to, okay? The Thessalonians wanted to kill him. The Bereans wanted to hear more. Okay, that's what truth does to people. Some it affects adversely and they hate you. Others want to hear more of it. Those are the ones that are usually few and far between, as Jesus said in Matthew 7. 3 times in Matthew 7, actually. So, what is the spirit of prophecy? Or the testimony of Jesus? It's the spirit of prophecy. Now, notice here, verse 10. Ready for this? So, he falls at his feet to worshiping. He says, don't do that. But why did he do that? Go back to... This will take another hour to do this. No, go to verse 7. Let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him. Now notice, we talked about this earlier, so I wanted to bring this up. This is Isaiah chapter 24 and 25, where we were earlier. Let me read this again from Revelation chapter 19, verse 7. Let us rejoice and be glad and give glory to him, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready, and it was given to her to clothe herself in fine linen, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. Now get this. You know that the message is repeated 7 times in Revelation. So in Revelation chapter 6, who got those fine, bright linens of white? So the souls that were under the altar, they were in Sheol. They were waiting. It's just a little while. God told them. Anyway, verse 9. Then he said to me, right, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper. Well, where have we seen that before? Jesus talked about this. What is that? Matthew 22. He said, let me back up. Blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, these are true words of God. Then he fell on his feet to worship him. Why did he fall on his feet to worship him? Because here's what was taking place. The supper was taking place. The wedding feast at the marriage of the Lamb, which is the time of the resurrection, which is the time when, guess what? The relationship with Yahweh is restored and Hades is destroyed. It's thrown into the lake of fire after being emptied. And you say, oh, no, that's yet to happen. Really? Look at Revelation chapter 20. Just because there's a chapter division doesn't mean there's a thought division. Verse 7. When the 1,000 years are completed, Satan will be released from his prison and will come out to deceive the nations which are in the 4 corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather together for the war. That's a whole other study, but that's specific. the war. The number of them is like the sand of the seashore. They came up upon the broad plain of the earth. Here's the war. And surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city, and fire came down from heaven and devoured them. And the devil who deceived them, listen to this, the war is taking place. This is that great spiritual battle of Ephesians chapter 2. With the powers and the principalities, this is that battle. This is the war. And for those who say, well, Sheol is still around and that's where you go to wait, they think Jesus didn't win the war and he wasn't victorious. So at this time of the war, when the camp of the saints is surrounded that beloved city and it's destroyed with fire from heaven, you realize that's just an idiom. It's phraseology. And the devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are also, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. When did that happen? When was the beast and the false prophet and Satan thrown into the lake of fire and destroyed? In 70, when the city was surrounded at the culmination of the great war, of the war. Then I saw a great white throne, verse 11, and him who sat upon it, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. Heaven and earth fled away. Well, see, there's the physical planet being destroyed. No, it's not. That's that old covenant fleeing away. Matthew 5, verses 17 and 18. Right? Heaven and earth will be destroyed, but my words will last forever. What were the words of Jesus? The new covenant? So if his words on the new covenant remains after the first heaven and earth are destroyed, what does that mean the first heaven and earth are? The old covenant. It's real simple, isn't it? That's Matthew 24, verse 35. Anyway, so I saw the dead and the great and the small, verse 12, Revelation 20, standing before the throne, and the books were open. And another book was open, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from the things which were written in the books according to their deeds. And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and Hades gave up the dead which were in them, and they were judged, every one of them, according to their deeds. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. When did this take place? At the time of the war, which was the surrounding of the camp of the saints, when it was destroyed by God. And that'll never happen again, according to Isaiah 24 through 27. It'll never happen again. It's a one and done deal. That was the war. The definite article, war. The war. And who was victorious at that time? I don't know about you, but I believe Jesus was victorious, and that the plan of Yahweh was being worked with perfect faithfulness. It's pretty simple. And because of that, we can have salvation today. Okay, so I'm 18 minutes over, and I thank all of you for being with us tonight. Okay, I know this was a little long, and I went over again, but thank you all so much. And hey, there is a battle going on right now. And I want you all to keep Brother Bobby in your prayers. As I mentioned a moment ago, he's getting a lot of flack and a lot of heat for standing up for the truth. But that is being a New Testament Christian. That is being bold. Peter, James, John, Paul, think about these guys and how they were persecuted for simply telling the truth. These guys get beat within an inch of their lives, and they escape. And what do? First, as soon as they break free of all that, what do? They get with their brother, and they're like, man, can you believe that? That wasn't right, and I'm going to sue them. And no, they were praising God. Friends, that is boldness. That is boldness. Bobby, brother, I love you, and I love you for it. And you just, man, oh man, you just keep on doing it. Just fantastic. And not only Bobby, Bobby's in the middle of it Roy went through it. Rooster went through it. I've went through it. Holger's, and it's something you never stop going through, just like your first century counterparts. They hate us. They hate us because we stand for the truth. I asked a guy today on Facebook over this Adam dying thing. He's like, Adam died. You know, he died. Really? He physically died. He didn't want to physicalize that. He wanted to spiritualize it. Isn't that amazing how they pick and choose? So I asked him, did he eat the day that he ate? Wonder why I never get responses to that. I mean, some people do. They try, but if he ate the day that he ate, he died the day that he ate. All right, that's it. Hey, I love all of you. I want you to please keep my wife in your prayers. Brother Roy and his wife going through lots of stuff. Please keep him and Mary Ellen in your prayers. We love them. All these guys are just so special to me. I have never experienced the kind of camaraderie as I have with this group of men who stand for the truth. And believe it or not, they're not judgmental. Certainly not like what we see in the modern day traditional denominational Church of Christ. So there you go. I'll be back around here next week at the same time, Lord willing, hoping that everything goes well and we'll be able to do that. Maybe Trent will have everything calmed down. He's got his fiance here and her children, and they are going through the whole visa process, but they are here now, and be praying for him that all that goes well. If you're listening, brother, we love you, and you just take a deep breath. I know it's hard on you, but he is literally starting from scratch with a house and a ready-made family, and he is hitting the ground running. So keep him in your prayers too. That's it. We're gonna go. We're gonna leave you, and we're gonna say thank you so much for watching here tonight. And there is one thing I need to do. This helps me, believe it or not. So come on, because when I close this, the programs are not synced at all. So playing a song helps me to figure this out. Let's pick a good one. How about I don't know that one. This one I know. We'll do this one. I can't think of anything in there that's messed up that I can think of. Anyway, love y'all. We'll see you next time. You all have a wonderful night and a happy Thanksgiving. And we will close out with this, and we'll listen to this for a little while. Gethsemane, said loving Father, if you will, let this cup pass from me. No, he was thinking, grief, death would bring to his own. Deep was his sorrow when he was praying alone. You can catch the sad tone of his voice as he said, Thy will, blessed will, not my own, must be done. As a lamb to the slaughter, he soon must be led to die as the crucified one. When he was praying, Jesus was praying there in Gethsemane. Said loving Father, if you will, let this cup pass from me. No, he was thinking, grief, death would bring to his own. Deep was his sorrow when he was praying alone. As he prayed there alone in such deep agony, it was a most beautiful prayer. Just to think his great heart was all broken for me, that he my great sorrow must share. When he was praying,
Jesus was praying there in Gethsemane. Said, loving Father, if you will, let this cup pass from me. No, he was thinking, grief, death would bring to his own. Deep was his sorrow, when he was praying alone.